they thought they were safe. Quiet towns, locked doors, friends and family just a phone call away. But late at night, when the lights went out, someone started tapping at the glass. Watching. Waiting. Smiling like he knew a secret no one else could see. These are 3 real accounts from people who should have been safe in their homes, their rentals, their dream houses. Instead, they faced something darker, a stranger who never knocked, who always came back, and who sometimes found his way inside. Each story begins small, a delivery driver's odd question, a knock that sounds like nothing, a cabin rental that seemed too good to be true. And each one ends the same way, with the unshakable fear that once someone chooses your window, they'll never really leave. The first story? It all started with pizza. It was supposed to be an ordinary night. A college student had just settled in, late book spread across the table, when a knock rattled the door. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened it, a man in a delivery uniform stood there holding a pizza. The student shook his head. "You've got the wrong place, I didn't order that." But the delivery man didn't move. He just kept smiling, tilting his head, asking again if he was sure he hadn't placed the order. It should have ended there, wrong address, simple mistake. But the man lingered. His eyes didn't leave the student, as if he was studying him, memorizing the inside of the apartment, the way the lock clicked when the door shut. Finally, after an uncomfortable silence, the student pushed the door closed. He tried to laugh it off. Just a mix-up, right? But less than an hour later, there was another knock. This time, no pizza. Just the same man, standing closer than before. That's when the student realized it wasn't about food at all. A young couple thought they'd found the perfect getaway, a cozy cabin listed online, hidden in the woods, the kind of place where you can disconnect from everything. The listing had glowing reviews, photos of warm fireplaces, and the promise of complete privacy. At first, it lived up to the dream. They unpacked, cooked dinner, and laughed about how quiet everything was. But that quiet didn't last. On their second night, just past midnight, the girlfriend froze. She swore she heard footsteps on the porch. Her boyfriend brushed it off, maybe an animal. But then came the unmistakable sound of the doorknob turning. Slowly. Carefully. When he rushed to check, no one was there. The lock was still in place, but something felt wrong. He decided to recheck the listing, and that's when he noticed the detail they had missed. The cabin had 2 keys available for guests. And they only had one. Later, while lying in bed, he heard breathing. Not from his girlfriend, but from somewhere inside the cabin. For one family, the nightmare started with something so small they almost ignored it. At night, their dog would bark at the back window, growling low like it saw something no one else could. They chalked it up to raccoons or shadows, until the youngest daughter spoke up. She told her parents she saw a man outside. Not once, but every night. Always at the same window, always standing completely still. At first, they didn't believe her. Kids have wild imaginations. But then, one evening, the father finally pulled back the curtain himself. And there he was. A man, grinning ear to ear, face pressed against the glass like he'd been waiting for them to notice. The police were called, but by the time they arrived, the man had vanished into the woods behind the house. They searched, but found nothing. The family tried to go back to normal, locking doors, closing blinds, pretending it was over. But it wasn't. Because the next night, he came back. Not to the window this time, but standing at the edge of the hallway, inside the house. After the break-in, the family didn't stay another night. They packed what they could, left dishes in the sink, clothes in the dryer, and drove to a relative's house hours away. For a while, they thought the nightmare was over. But a week later, when the father returned to grab the rest of their belongings, something felt off the moment he stepped inside. The blinds were open, every single one. And on the kitchen table sat a half-empty glass of water. He hadn't left it there. Neighbors later admitted they'd seen movement inside the house while it was supposed to be vacant, a shadow pacing back and forth, sometimes even standing in the doorway, watching the street as if it belonged there. The family never went back. The house eventually sold, but to this day, none of them know who the smiling man was, or how long he had been living in their home after they fled. And as disturbing as that was, the next story makes it even worse. A traveling salesman checked into a roadside motel after a long drive. It was cheap, nothing fancy, but it was late and he just needed sleep. The room seemed normal at first: bed, lamp, a flickering TV. But something about the mirror across from the bed felt wrong. When he leaned closer, he noticed the glass didn't reflect quite right. There was a gap, barely visible, around the frame. Curious, he knocked. The sound was hollow. That's when the realization hit: it wasn't just a mirror. It was a window. Behind it, in the darkness, someone shifted. He couldn't see them fully, just the faint outline of movement. Whoever it was had been standing there, watching him since the moment he entered the room. He bolted out, reported it to the front desk, but the clerk only sighed. He muttered something about kids breaking in sometimes. But the salesman swore it wasn't a kid, it was a grown man, tall, silent, smiling. And if he hadn't noticed the mirror, he might never have known he wasn't alone. In an apartment complex downtown, a woman began noticing something strange. Every night when she came home from work, a man was standing at the end of her hallway. He never spoke. He never moved. He just stood there, hands at his sides, watching. At first, she tried to be logical. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe he lived there too. But as days turned into weeks, his presence never changed. Same spot. Same hour. Same unblinking stare. One night, nerves finally pushed her to speak. She called out, asking if he needed help. The man tilted his head, and smiled. Then, without a word, he walked toward her. Not fast, not threatening, just slow, steady steps echoing in the hall. Terrified, she rushed inside her apartment and locked the door. Minutes later, she heard the faint scrape of fingernails against the wood. Just enough to remind her he was still out there. When she reported it, management swore no one matching his description lived in the building. But she kept seeing him anyway. And the night she moved out? He was already waiting by the elevators, as if he'd been expecting her. A college student moved into a new apartment and began unpacking her things. She wanted to capture the memory, so she snapped a few photos of her new place to send to friends. Later that night, as she scrolled through them, her stomach dropped. In the corner of one photo, near the window, was a face. Pale. Grinning. Staring straight at her. She convinced herself it was a trick of the light, maybe a reflection. But when she took more pictures the next day, the same face appeared. Always at the edges. Always smiling. Terrified, she showed the photos to a friend, who zoomed in and pointed out something she hadn't noticed. The man wasn't outside the window. He was inside the room. Police were called, but after a search, nothing was found. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no evidence at all. The official report suggested camera glitches. But weeks later, after she moved out, the new tenant posted photos online of strange things left behind in the vents. A small blanket. Empty water bottles. And a stack of Polaroids, of the girl, sleeping in her bed. Each of these stories started small: a knock, a smile, a shadow in the corner of your eye. The kind of detail you might dismiss if you were tired, or tell yourself was nothing. But the truth is, not every stranger leaves when the door closes. Some keep coming back. Some are already inside. What makes these stories so unsettling isn't just the fear of someone breaking in. It's the realization that the people we fear the most don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes, they want to be seen. They want you to know they're there. And they want you to wonder when they'll show up again. So the next time you hear a knock at midnight, or catch a glimpse of movement in your reflection, ask yourself, is it just your imagination? Or has someone been smiling at you all along?